There you go. Oh.
And then we have those black things in our way again. I can't remember. Did you figure out how to get rid of them? So there's a black bar.
I'll get rid of them. Yeah, I'll get rid of
them.
them. One second. I do know how to get rid of it. So give me just 1 second because I want to back up since I messed up there.
Oh, because you have to reshare without doing the optimizing. Is that it? Okay, great.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm trying to learn that too. Thank you.
Find the right spot here that I'm trying to get to. Okay, take off the optimizing and go back to where we were at. Okay. So I don't know, read the prayer again. I'll read the prayer again. So we have it all on recording. So dear Lord, it seems just moments ago, we stood in 2018. Give me just a second. We stood in 2018 and watched you change the course of the movement. It's approaching 3.5 years later. Lord, I pray that we will learn the lessons from this history. May we not lose sight of the seriousness of a failure to educate ourselves properly, of a failure to see love in the messages given, of a failure to let the corrections change our hearts. Save your people, I pray, from their Laodicean condition, and I pray that you'll be with us now. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, Christine, for that. Okay, so this was a follow-up or a finishing up of what she taught on January 1st because she didn't get through all the points that she wanted to cover. So it's completion of that January 1st presentation. So I chose to focus, and this is Elder Tess, I chose to focus that presentation on 2014. If you remember, we went through that review last week as well, when we went through all the events of 2014 that tell us that what happened in 2014 show us what to expect here and what to look for here at the Sunday Law. Adventism identifies correctly that it's all about the Sunday Law. Everything's all about the Sunday Law. And as we walked out of the reform line of the priests, this being the reform line of the priests, as we walked out of that, I wanted us to identify correctly what took place in that history, that it exists in two parts. So this history here of the reform line of the priests existed in two parts. 1989 to 2014, you have to accept the date that 2014 exists. It's a prophetic context with all its implications for Adventism, for the United States, for a final generation. Someone said recently in someone else's presentation where lots of people commented, and they should be grateful I wasn't there to answer them. I mean, a lot of the comments, not necessarily this one, God led us with baby steps. And we all talked about this after that because we know that that was our discussion that was heard. I don't agree. If you think that this was baby steps, the reason we need to repeat this history is because it impacts how we behave now. This was not gentle. I would suggest this entire reform line is brutal. 2012 is a neat example, but it's not the only one. If you're here in 2012, you predict 2014 is the Sunday Law. You find that it's about you and 5 other people in a world of billions, and that can't be right. Numbers matter, don't they? And then 2013 and 2014, 2014 passes, there's no Sunday Law issue. Still no one agrees with you. Yet 2015, 16, 17, and 18, and you're really lonely, and you're not shaken because you know it's right. And people have been trying to get through for 3.5 years saying, don't talk about 2014. I want to know about Panium, and expressing doubt because it's January 2022 and I haven't laid it out yet. What would these people have done in 2012? So we kind of touched on that as well, as how people are wanting answers of Panium. And yet we see what happened here in 2012, that the answers didn't come for a very long time. And I think we talked about that the other night. Here's the patience of the saints. Somebody brought that up. This is not being led gently, this reform line. It's not being led gently. You could argue that God is doing the best he can, but I see the tests this movement has faced as brutal ones. If that was not the case, more people would be here. but not 1 in 200 who's had an opportunity has accepted because I don't think they found it gentle. So I look at my life and see that it brought me to places of crossroads. I never thought of them as tests, but crossroads. It's like I learned something. This is before the movement. I learned something, and then I was expected to live up to it. And when I didn't live up to it, God was merciful to bring me to this crossroads, is what I look very early on. And this is talking very early on in my experience. And I had to choose. And it was hard decisions. It was leaving behind people that I care about. They were hard decisions. And that was just my own personal life. This was the prophetic message and the prophetic, the reform line and the work of the reform line to reform, right? To bring us to understand. And so it brings us to places in our lives that we have to sometimes be corrected. Oftentimes, I know I have been, to be corrected and to be reproved and to remember and not lose sight of our mission. So they wouldn't have seen it gentle back here. And we were blind to the experience of others. I myself am guilty of seeing the experience of myself and not understanding the experience of others. So you have to accept the date exists, wait 4 or 5 years, and start to see why, start to see the content. And from 1989 to 2014, how is that prophetic history laid out? How did you understand the 2520, which is in here? How did you understand any of that prophetic content here and here in either one of these? People waited for God to lead and for it to be laid out by the mouthpieces that he chose to work through. I don't think it's disconnected from sexism or the Laodicean condition that you get to this period, 2014 to 2021. The female leadership and the content, and the vast majority of the movement who stay with the movement say thank you for the theme of sexism and gender issue. Now we will work equality out for ourselves and apply it how we want. And I brought this point up before.
Can
Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just remembering back on that because I remember when Jeff was teaching that in the School of the Prophets and bringing up the 2014, and I didn't know anything about it, right? We didn't know anything about it, at least this side, right, where we live, until later. But when they were bringing it out on the line, I remember trying to think of all the literal things it could be, just like she brings up, right? I think one of mine was Obamacare. I even typed that into the little message down below, because that was the only way you could interact with the class. I was always so envious of those people in that classroom and how they were learning. But I typed in Obamacare because I thought, oh, that's a type of force. It's a type of Sunday law, and how we were looking at the literal. But because of the abundance of evidence that God gave us in between time, the focus wasn't on that after a while. It was absorbing all the new wonderful things he was teaching us, and he was giving us such an abundance of evidence that just seemed like a minor thing. And now it's so clear when we get to this place and she lays it out like that. But I'm so thankful that God, how he gives you room to doubt if you want to, but he also gives you so much evidence that if you begin to tick it off in your brain, you're like, oh, I can't even play with that doubt because there's just too much that's true. I know it's true. So very interesting. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was going to mention, I'm going to log in on my phone so I can see the chat. I was going to mention how, and I brought this up before, that I'm going to type this right so I can get logged in and see the chat. How when they were getting ready to go to Jericho, right? Joshua was given instruction by Jesus. And I've mentioned this part before, that the spirit of prophecy, she talks about how it was up to the people. Joshua gave the people only what they needed to know. He didn't explain all the details. He didn't explain everything to them. He told them what they needed to know to get them ready, and their instructions to how they were going to, what they were going to do. And it was up to the people to believe or not. And to trust whether or not it was God that was leading that movement. And you see that also in Revelation, where it gives you the steps and how God works, and then working through John. You know, you can believe John or you can not. You can believe Elder Parminder and Elder Tess or not. You can believe that God is leading this movement or not. And as Susan said, he leaves room for doubt. It wouldn't be a test of faith if he didn't. Right? Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so we're done there. Okay, so in 2019, how much of equality was understood? What was explained was no headship, no sexist standards, and dress reform. God gave us 2 months only to internalize that before a new dispensation started, and God was going to define for his people how to understand the prophetic message of gender equality. So just before that shut door, 2 months, he gives us this and gives us 2 months to accept it and go forward. And God was going to define for his people how to understand the prophetic message of gender equality. And most of the movement turned up off. Most of the movement weren't listening by then, weren't willing to allow God to open up what equality had to look like. Because now the message shone a light on their own character. And now the person holding the torch is a female. And after 2 months to listen, we watch, absorb the German camp meeting. What that was to look like prophetically had to be laid out, and the vast majority of people have decided to do that for themselves. To think the way Laodicean Adventists thought back here, when they said we have our own personal experience, we will wait for God to tell us directly, not through a human being, but we just went through, God will use a human being to do it. That's the same mindset that made Adventism reject the earlier messages. Because for those of us that have been around, we know that this message went through. Adventism. We were in Adventism and we got it. I think most of us, maybe there might be someone that wasn't even in Adventism. I don't know. I don't remember specifically, but in our group anyways, without looking at who's here, but we were in Adventism and the message came to us. I know that I tried to share the message with others, right? And I'm sure you did too. We all did. So another set of thoughts. Go ahead.
That's such a poor argument on the slide before. I was still thinking about that, where they said we won't listen to a human being. To think the way Laodicean Adventists, let's see, when they said we have our own personal experience, we'll wait for God to tell us directly, not through a human being. That's such a poor argument, because to even be in the message, you listened to a human being.
Yeah.
You know, and God always uses human beings. The Bible was written by human beings. So I don't even understand the logic in that argument.
Yeah, you're very right, Susan. Because not only it's a poor argument, and not only will they not listen to human beings that God has sent, but they won't listen to God either. So they're just making an excuse because they won't listen to God, because that was, you talk about the parable between Lazarus and the rich man, right? And Abraham. And the Lazarus, he was Abraham's bosom, and the rich man was asking to send Lazarus back to his brothers to repent, because if Lazarus from the dead go back, go back, and maybe they'll listen. And what was Abraham's response? Or Jesus' response? They won't believe Moses. They're not going to believe, even if Lazarus returns from the dead. And Jesus, he returned from the dead. They didn't believe him either, still. So it's just an excuse. They're not going to believe anybody because they don't want to, not even God.
Yeah, they didn't listen to Jesus when he came. And yes, Eva, that is what it is. They're waiting for God to tell them directly. They're waiting for a dream. They're waiting for a vision. They're waiting for him to speak to them. When all around, God is speaking. When all around, what does it say, that the latter rain is falling on hearts all around? Maybe somebody can remember that more clearly. But they don't know it. And it's the message that we've been receiving that is the work of God. And he is speaking through the mouthpieces that he has chosen.
Amen. And when you listen to Elder Tess or Elder Parmenter, I'm just blown away by how well it's verbalized. Tess is like my daughter's age, right? And I wasn't anywhere even close to being, I'm still struggling, but anyhow, what I'm trying to say is if you can't hear God through them, through her, you can't hear God, period. It's a miracle. You can tell the Holy Spirit is working through them. You can absolutely tell.
I think our being here is a testament to what you said. We're all standing here present at this Bible study because of the faith we see in the lines. And we are here. We come every Sabbath and forsake the worldly things, and it's a beautiful thing, because this movement has been shaken, I don't know how many times. It was shaken right before we came in, and there's probably another shaking coming up. But I think our presence is a testament to our faith in the movement.
There's surely a shaking. We're hearing the presentations that we're hearing, because in this presentation in particular, because people are resisting and rejecting and such. The Laodicean condition in the movement is being addressed, not the Laodicean condition in the Adventist Church. It's in the movement that it's being addressed. And we'll go through that because she defines it as we go forward. I might have defined it in the January 1st one too. So, but we'll go through that. So 2019, Raffia occurred throughout that year of 2019, as Putin took over more and more spheres of influence. And the chart and the presentation that she did on that, it's on the main page on Repairs of the Breach 7 website, the board work, what she did, and then also the presentation if anybody needs to go review that. But took over more and more spheres of influence: Raffia, feminism, external and internal. A Time magazine headline from 2019 was "How Putin Built a Ragtag Empire of Tyrants and Failing States." It was easily documented throughout the year. And the internal message towards the end of the year, the internal dates, is August and September, and the German camp meeting, which was feminism. So the internal dates, August, September, the German camp meeting, and it was feminism. So we enter a new dispensation, and it's May of 2020. God is already warning us about the Apis bull, to everyone thinking they're going to wait for God to tell them directly or equality looks like, what equality looks like, to say simply what God is telling them. What you've done is taken a little bit of the message, a little bit of God, say, no, this is equality, like Israel, who said this is the Apis bull that led us out of Egypt. It is a representative of our God, but cast it into the mold of all that sexism, and they still wanted to keep it. And I want to make one point here. Who messed up who? Did Israel go and mess up Egypt and make Egypt sexist? Or did Egypt mess up Israel? Because everyone's blaming Adventism, everyone's blaming Christianity. Right from here, May 20, we should have been tracing it back, that it's Egypt that did the damage to Israel, not the other way around. It was marked by death, the external. So death was the external. And that death was George Floyd, right? And then went on to be the death of John Lewis in Congress, Chadwick Boseman, did I say that right? The actor. RBG, the Supreme Court, and Helen Reddy, the singer. Feminism and racism. The death. Sorry, guys. Internal. The warning had to do the painful work of allowing others to identify your sexism. The same thing you were expected to do 1989 to 2014 that didn't hurt as much. From May of 20, Apis bull, internal, death, external. So you had the internal was understanding the Apis bull, and the external was the death. And this was what waymark? Here, what do we call this little waymark?
The death decree?
I know, no, the actual of the two waymarks. What was this one?
Oh, increase of knowledge?
Conquer. Oh,
And you're right. Yeah. Conquered extra. Yeah. So, but increase of knowledge is the one I was looking for, but conquered is correct too. So we come to about August 21 here. Here we find the end of the Afghanistan War as predicted and the subject of LGBT. I want to answer someone's question at this point in time. The person who asked this question asked it some time ago, and my difficulty in answering it privately is I don't think it's that simple. Some corners of the world over the last 3 years, especially those heavily influenced by a male leadership, have avoided teaching what I've presented. They have relied on their own material, or they have taught elder parmenders, and I strongly doubt that they have taught that as he intended. And the level of equality in those corners of the world give an indication of the results of the way they have chosen to teach. So I just want to answer a question, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So what we actually do in our ministries as things trickle down, how we treat the message, how we study the message, what we're studying, if we're doing our own thing, what she's showing here is those that chose their own materials and not teaching her materials, that there's that the level of equality in those corners would give an indication of the results of the way they've chosen to teach. There's a big responsibility in the work that God has given us to do. The person asked, we have accepted LGBT. He says members here in the ministries are asking if the movement will now accept bestiality. And he said he wasn't sure how to answer them because maybe now that we have understood equality, maybe we would accept bestiality as a relationship. The reason I found that question difficult to answer is not because it doesn't have a very clear, simple answer, but because the root of the problem goes a lot deeper. What's the root of the problem of that question? Somebody remember what's the root of the problem?
Inequality, no consent.
Resistance.
Still domination.
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if Felt answered the correct answer, but what I was thinking is that's what Protestantism does, because that's one of their arguments about homosexual marriages, and they say that it's going to also become pedophilia. What's going to be next? Pedophilia. And then they go to bestiality, right? They take it to the furthest extreme to make people think the worst possible outcome and to divert people's mind from a true loving relationship, right? That's exactly the argument Protestantism uses, is that it's gonna, is bestiality gonna be next? But I'm not sure I know what the answer was on this next slide.
We'll go ahead and keep going then. And she spells it out really clearly. So let's say that you have this human being here, and this human being is going to have a relationship with an animal. I'm not wanting to mock the question, I'm being very serious. If they were going to have a relationship with an animal, what does that relationship look like? Where would you put the animal? Would you put the animal here? Or would you put the animal here? In brief, is this a relationship of equals, consenting equals, or of necessity, is it a relationship of headship? So people can say lots of reasons why it would be immoral. It's not natural. That's not how we were designed. The problem is those are the arguments used to argue against gay marriage. So I don't care much for those answers. My concern is when obviously multiple people have this question in the late months of 2021. My concern is I believe they've gone through the following process. For their life in a very strong fashion, it's been a man over a woman, man over a woman. And then we come to 2021 and we say homosexual relationships are good. They've still got this model in their heads, man over a woman. But they say, okay, it doesn't have to be female. Now you can have a man down here, passive. Now you can have a passive man. So you can have the patriarch, the man, the headship, and the woman, or you can have a man. Either one can be passive. And it's only the places that hold to this and the religions that hold to this that associate gay marriage. They go from gay marriage to say you might as well have an animal or a child. So if you can have this headship, this hierarchy, this headship, you can have a woman beneath you, or now that homosexuality is okay, you can have a male beneath you. You can then therefore have an animal or a child. Because they're all relationships of ownership and control, no consent, no equality. So these are relationships of ownership and control. There's no consent and no equality. And I think Bell said no consent. If people understood the message of equality, if the members wondering, have been taught the messages of equality and spent 2 years changing their mindset, I'm not going to draw her with long hair. So if we needed to be spending this time changing our mindset, okay? I'm not going to draw her with long hair and a skirt to make her female, just saying that this is a female. If they had got that this existed, was God's intent, they would never have seen gay marriage put a man down here and a woman, then started considering bestiality, which inevitably has to bring up the question of pedophilia. So that was kind of a confusing sentence, but I think if you guys have questions on it, if they would have understood equality, and this is all gone, this hierarchy is gone, they would have understood. They wouldn't have gone to the place of putting bestiality and pedophilia here. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay. I know I had troubles, like I said, troubles in some places transcribing this one from the recording. So as long as I make sure that we all got the point. And what she was saying is that there are people that were in this period, in this time here, that were teaching their own presentations. They weren't teaching the presentations of Elder Tess and Elder Parminder. They're teaching their own presentations. And therefore they still have this image here and this mindset still here. And this mindset is going to lead to this. But if they had equality, they would have never led to this.
I think that's the difference between this form of methodology in proving our truths, because you can clearly see, right, that man was given dominion over all the animals, right? So it's a dominant relationship and how we're learning where we're to be equals. And, oh, there was a reason I said that. Oh, I hate when that happens, when the thought just goes poof. Boy, I hate when that happens. Oh, rats. Oh, as opposed to the liberal, it came back. As opposed to, okay, say the liberal people that are still in the Adventist church who say, okay, they can accept homosexual relationship. Or like the article you posted, Elaine. I saw it this morning. I don't know when you posted it, but the most recent one about the statistics of people who are bisexual now and homosexual now, as opposed to years previous, right? And that's a whole nother topic on why there's more. We know that apostate Protestantism will say it's because of the low loose morals, right? But anyhow, so as opposed to a liberal Adventist might have that same mindset as the people in the world, that it's okay now. But it'll be based on feeling. Do you know what I'm saying? They'll just have a feeling that it's okay. It's not, they're not able to prove it scripturally. Where we can actually prove it scripturally. Did someone want to speak? Pardon me?
We can prove it through the lines.
Yes. So it's not just going by you know what the. Sorry, did someone want to speak?
It was Sarah, but I'm not sure if she wanted to. If you do, Sarah, go ahead after Susan, but I did put you on mute just in case it wasn't, just in case it was an accident. But feel free to unmute yourself if you want to say something. And I made you co-host, Christine, so help me with that. Go ahead.
So that was basically, sorry, I interrupted you, Elaine.
No, good.
Oh, so that was basically all I kind of was seeing in this, because even if you had accepted it as being okay, you couldn't prove it. You know, those liberal Adventists that think it's okay, like the rest of the world, statistics that are now coming around with it, they don't have a biblical way of proving it, but we do. And it's just awesome. Anyway, that's all.
So how do we prove it? You say a biblical way to prove it. How actually do we prove it?
This way, by showing on the line the progression of how we came to understand equality, right?
And how did we get there? What got us there?
Well, it was do you mean the three movements? I don't know how to maybe simply state what you're asking.
No, just real basic. 1989, we saw what comes in and internally in 1989 that sets the pace for the whole reform line and going all the way through. What is it that came here that has taught us all this? Is it a thus saith the Lord that taught us all this?
No, it's the methodology, the line upon line,
Yeah.
right? And yeah, that's kind of what I guess I thought I said that, but maybe I didn't.
That's right. I just wanted to
I have to learn to be clearer.
You were, but I just
So
want
please be patient with me.
it helps me to be constantly repetitious that we have those terms in our mind and understand them, because people are going to be coming at us with a thus saith the Lord, and it's like, okay, we can defend it biblically. I mean, are they going to say biblically we're defending it? No, they're not. You know what I mean? It's the methodology that will defend it, because they're going to claim with a thus saith the Lord that homosexuality is a sin. See the difference?
Yes, but we do use the Bible parabolically.
Right. Right.
So we still are using, it is biblical, but it's biblical with our methodology.
It's understanding the Bible correctly. I think of it as when Jesus when Jesus is talking with the Pharisees and they're using a thus saith Moses. So in other words, they're using the thus saith the Lord, and Jesus doesn't agree with them.
How do you read?
Yeah, how do you read? So so that's what got us here is how do we read, and the methodology has taught us to read correctly, to come to right understandings, to make us the army that God has called us to be. So thank you, good input. Okay, so the only people who can go to that question are people who deep down believe that a woman in a relationship could ever have been replaced by an animal or a child. Because that's what they're saying. If you can lower a man to that standard, you can't control animals as well. I don't know if I'm going to say that right. If you can lower a man to that standard, can't you control animals as well? Okay, so if you can lower a man here, because they don't accept equality, but if you're accepting a gay relationship or a homosexual relationship, can't you control animals the same way? This is just some of the evidence, some more obvious, some more subtle, of the efforts once there was female leadership to believe that God would teach them individually what equality, that's supposed to be equality, would look like. It is also what happens when people do not approach the subject of LGBT squarely through the lens of gender equality. The order always mattered. And I believe this is really important, because if you remember that we've not been reviewing some of the presentations that, the presentations that took place here, because the order mattered. We had to correctly understand gender equality in order to rightly be able to handle LGBT. And for all in this period of time in here, in all of here, we heard it over and over again in her presentations, that people are wanting to just go on to LGBT. We don't need to be talking about sexism all the time. And that's kind of code word for, don't talk to me about my sexism. Let's just move on to the next topic. And, eventually God does move on. She said that about racism. For people that didn't want to let go of their racism, eventually God will move on without them. And God has been being merciful to help us to change this mindset. So the order did matter, because to rightly understand LGBT, you have to correctly understand gender equality.
And can I add to that? Because LGBT is rooted in, how can I say, I don't want to say this wrong, but it's an issue in sexism. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, if it's coming out right. What I mean is that, because people have set ways on how men and women should behave, or society has these views of wanting to box people into, this is what a male is like, this is what and not, and all of that, it really does hinder people to just truly express who they are. and be who they are. So, and that, you know, interferes with people genders, and, you know, and yeah, so I just wanted to kind of put that in there, that sexism is a issue that covers women, the treatment of women, and the LGBT plus community.
Yeah, so if you took this image, this is your mindset, that a man is over a woman, that's your mindset, then you're going to accept LGBT incorrectly as well. That this will be your mindset. Okay, so it's okay now for same-sex relationships and marriage, but as long as there's one that's passive, because that's the model that they have in their mind, that there's one that's passive.
Exactly. Like a lot of people think that if you have a man-man relationship, that one of them has to be the wife, one of them has to be the female. And the same with the lesbian relationship. Well, which one is Butch? Which one is the guy? And I tried to explain that to somebody and they just kind of blew me off. It's like that there's equal. You don't have to have that hierarchy.
Right. Right. And this
that's Greek too, right?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Go ahead.
That's where that kind of came from. Starts with a P. I can't remember the word.
Pederasty.
Not
Pederasty.
Yeah, that's it. Pederasty. Thank you, Phil. Yes, where they even justified relationships with the young, you know, young boys, grooming them. And so it was all about dominance and oppression. And I think and I know exactly what you're talking about, Christine. And I wonder if people in those relationships have not also, in those gay relationships is what I'm trying to state when you were saying that people that comment on a relationship, you know, who's the husband, who's the wife, or whatever in this relationship. I wonder if those couples are still stuck also in this system, this hierarchical system of one has to be the dominant and one has to be the submissive role. You know, if even they themselves understand equality as God's teaching us, I wonder. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, all the more beautiful for this work to free anyone from that superior, that hierarchy, that submissive, dominant role to true equality. You know?
Amen.
So yeah, if this
Yes.
is still your mindset, and like she was saying in a few slides back, those that chose to teach their own understanding of equality, and imagine this is in the movement, teaching a group of people, you know, that's what we do each week, right? If you're in a group that's being taught and led this mindset, never leaving this mindset, because you're not listening to the presentations and teaching and studying the presentations that Elder Tess has given. So your mindset remains here, so you can accept this relationship, but this relationship still has a dominant over the submissive, whether it be male or female. And you're going to have the wrong understanding of equality.
Elaine?
Yeah.
I recall also Elder Tess and Elder Parmenter, when they talked about this, they might not have put it all in the same sentence, but when they talk about this dominant versus, you know, submissive role, it basically, when they're actually trying to look at the verses in the Bible, the thus saith the Lord's, you know, that say that this is sinful and it's bad, it has to do, the word that they used over and over again was abuse. They said it's abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And And it really is abuse, because the whole system of headship, the whole system of one person is dominant, has their foot on the other one's neck, is abuse.
Yep.
There's no other way to word it. It's abuse. And so that's what makes it sinful. And looking at the parable nature of things, that helps us to understand. But I think a lot of people, if they're not going to be able to see equality, if they're not going to see the parable nature of the scripture, they're going to hang their hat on the few verses that the Bible does talk about these same-sex relationships being wrong, and they're not going to move away from it.
Yep. And it's holding on to that Laodicean condition. So the 21st, 2021, October 21st, 24th, sorry, there's a presentation called Understanding Feminism. It is a preliminary study to a camp meeting starting on about the 27th. Those days might be different if you're outside Australia. So if you want to review those, we actually have the notes, because Christine did the notes on all these presentations. You did all 4, right? I think you did.
I did 4 of them, but there are 5, so I have one more coming out.
Okay, so the notes are all there, and then you can also review the presentations. So that camp meeting is going to cover radical feminism. What has already been taught about feminism from 2019 is going to get formalized, because that's what 2021 is, formalization of the message. So what's already been taught is going to be formalized. So in other words, feminism is here, and you get an increase of knowledge, and then you get the formalization of it. But it's still being taught throughout here. And we can look back. That is, to me, like why we were always able to look back and see, wow, it was always there from the very beginning. So this camp meeting is going to cover radical feminism. What has already been taught about feminism from 2019 is going to get formalized, because that's what 2021 is. It's been growing since the German camp meeting, which was right over here, formalized in late October 2021. So radical feminism is formalized here. So I want to quote from a Wikipedia page, the Russo-Ukrainian crisis. It's the page I'm sure being updated daily on what's unfolding between Russia, Ukraine, and the West. It says, quote, in October and November of 2021, Russia began amassing troops and military equipment near the border with Ukraine, creating an international crisis and generating concerns over a potential invasion. The third paragraph down, the crisis has been described by commentators as one of the most intense since the Cold War. The aggravation of Russian-Ukrainian relations occurred in late October and early November, and was provoked by the first combat use of a Ukrainian drone. It lists some other events that clustered, and that was the end of that quote. It lists some other events that clustered around that same time period. And quoting again, during the period of the evening of October 29th to the evening of October 31, 2 days, the ceasefire regime in Donetsk, is that how you say that? I think I looked up the word, in Donetsk, Donetsk. I did look up the words to make sure I had that right. I'm pretty sure that was right. Was violated 988 times, and in Luhansk 471 times in 2 days. So the ceasefire regime, it was violated 988 times, and in Luhansk 471 times in 2 days. The foreign policy article from the end of 2021 said, Putin ends the year, and this was a headline, Putin ends the year on the center side stage. And as Biden pursued China for most of the year, this looked very unlikely. I just want to remind us very briefly what we teach. World War I, World War II, kind of overlapping. So they kind of overlapped, World War I and World War II, kind of overlapping. But this history is a period of time in a way that 2019 was not. And this is characterized by a Cold War on multiple levels, 2021 to Sunday law. It's characterized by a Cold War. Foreign policy headline from last week, a new Cold War to decide the future of Europe and the world. I haven't wanted to concentrate on Panium. I'm just putting something up very simply for structure. So this was an overlapping history of the world wars, World War I, World War II. And then she's marking 2021 to the Sunday Law, the Cold War, a new Cold War to decide the future of Europe and the world. That was a headline in Foreign Policy. But the Supreme Court is also active in October regarding the court cases of Mississippi and Texas. So we have seen Panium. We're watching it play out, which it will do for some years. So we're watching Panium. And remember that this is a deadly wound and then this is a death. So we'll watch it, she says, for some years. We have compared it to 1989, but we also need to contrast it with 1989. So often people get fixed on one, compare, and forget the other, contrast. 1989 was like a new dawn for democracy, full of hope. People who wanted that regime to end, the World Wide Web giving a new access to information. Now we have disinformation, people supporting their regime because of the way the World Wide Web has been weaponized. No hope and a fall towards authoritarianism. That's all I want to say about Panium. Compare and contrast. So falling towards the Sunday Law. So not just to compare it, but to also contrast it and how the World Wide Web is now weaponized. And we know from the communication technology that it was all opened up for the work of the gospel, but it can be used by either side. So coming back to the last two dispensations from 2014 to 2019, a slow effort to introduce the basic concept of gender equality. 2019 to 2021, whether or not people would be willing to have that laid out for them, taught by prophetic methodology, not through news articles. If this is a history of compromise, 2019 to Sunday Law, it's a history of compromise. It's all about compromise, and we were given an external example. What was our external example of compromise? Question for you guys. What was the external example of compromise?
Was it 1850?
Anybody else?
Biden's compromises?
The Democrat Party, Biden. But yes, we did learn it from looking at 1850, but we see it.
That's what I thought you meant before we got to where we are now. I thought you wanted the original place that brought us to the understanding, because then she brings in Clay and all that of compromise.
Right. So, because
You know,
go ahead.
well, thinking about this gender equality, I was just going to share something real quick because it always confused me. And I think maybe now this has helped. I think now I might have the answer from what we're learning. I met years ago when I was in the gay culture in San Francisco. I met a young man whom wanted to have a sex change to become a woman so that he could be in a relationship with another woman. And I remembered when I heard that, I just couldn't understand it, because I met all different kinds of people in that culture. It wasn't at all the gender stereotypical way I had been groomed to believe it was. And, you know, I was a hairdresser, so I worked with a lot of gay people during those years, and they would always invite me to go there, but I never wanted to go. But once I did, it opened up like this whole new world that I just never, understood. But most of the people didn't fit the stereotype of what people think a lesbian was, or what people thought a gay man was, because there was very manly men and there was very feminine acting lesbians, not manly lesbians. There was just all kinds, right? But when I met that young man, I felt so confused for him. Like, why would you want to have a sex change so that you could be with a woman? I didn't see, I was still stuck in the headship idea, right? The dominant and the submissive. So I think now, maybe, possibly, he wanted equality. He wanted comfort with his body and who he believed he was, but he didn't want to have someone dominating him. I'm wondering if in his own mind, by having that lesbian relationship after he got his sex change, would give him the equality he was looking for. I don't know if any of that just made sense, but I was trying to understand that experience because that was very confusing to me, you know?
One of the things that's confused me as well, but I think that God is shedding light on all of it when it comes to the whole gender issue and the whole message of equality. It's whatever they identify with, that's who they are. This is who I am. I didn't choose to be heterosexual and desire men. But you know what I mean? It's who they are. And everyone has the right to have the right to be who they are. But those are things like that would confuse me as well. So I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah. Good. It's hard to express sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So the Democrat Party is the compromise, and you were correct that looking at 1850 showed us that this would be compromise. But what we actually saw is the external example in our own history was the Democrat Party and Biden. And so this is all about compromise, 2019 to 2021. If it's that important, if compromise is that important, where should we trace it to? And we went through this a couple of weeks ago. Where do you trace compromise to if it's that important?
Was it 1989?
Correct. You'd have to be able to thread the needle of compromise all the way back, right? Which then brings her to the document of the Politics of Evasion. So 1989, I want us to go back to 1989. 1988, George Bush Sr. wins the presidential election. And a little context. In World War II, you had Franklin D. Roosevelt. He was a Democrat. He led the United States until he died in 1945. 1945, he dies, and from 1945 to 1988, a Democrat president has never won a second term. It's heavily dominated by the Republican Party. You have a Democrat president in Carter. People thought that was a disaster. In comes this attractive, charismatic Hollywood celebrity, Ronald Reagan. And the Democrats think it's okay to lose to him. He's so charismatic. What hope do we have? They lost to him for a second term. I think, of course, it's Reagan. Even today, he has this cult of personality. So they're not that worried about their political party. But then in 1988, they lose to George Bush Sr. He's not charismatic. He's not this Hollywood glow doesn't have this Hollywood glow about him. And the Democrats get scared. They could justify losing to Reagan, but it's been bad for half a century. It's the third loss in a row. So that's the background context here. And a couple of Democrats get together. This was William Galston, and then she doesn't name the other one. She later discusses, though. They write a manifesto, and it's called The Politics of Evasion, explaining the problems within their political party and what they need to do to fix them. One of the main authors, there's more than one, is a Democrat named William Galston. And I'm going to quote from two documents. The first is the original manifesto, this one here, The Politics of Evasion. And the second is an article that he wrote in 2013, where he goes back and references that document because he's trying to give helpful advice now to the Republican Party in 2013. So the 2013 article, which does show he wasn't reading political events correctly, but that's a separate point. It just shows that his logic is very faulty. So quoting, the Democratic Party's 1988 presidential defeat demonstrated that the party's problems would not disappear as many had hoped once Ronald Reagan left the White House. Without a charismatic president to blame for their ills, Democrats must now come face to face with reality. Too many Americans have come to see the party as inattentive to their economic interests. Too many Americans have come to see the party, the Democratic Party, as inattentive to their economic interests, indifferent, if not hostile, to their moral sentiments, and ineffective in defense of their national security. So the American people, too many see them as this. So, okay, so this is from 1989, the document, quoting, this paper is an exploration of 3 pervasive themes in the politics of evasion. And it then lists the three myths that they need to fight. So these are myths that this politics of evasion lists. Myth number 1 was the myth of liberal fundamentalism. They describe it, quoting, the first is the belief that the Democrats have failed because they have strayed from the true and pure faith of their ancestors. So noting that that's a myth, that they have strayed from the true and pure faith of their ancestors, which would be that true liberal fundamentalism, right? The second, the myth of mobilization. The second is the belief that Democrats need not alter public perceptions of their party, but can regain the presidency by getting current non-participants to vote, minority votes. The myth of mobilization. We can keep angering all of the others. If we just mobilize the minority groups, we will win. So you can keep angering, this is a myth as well. All the others is if you just mobilize the minority groups. Then there's the third myth of the congressional bastion. The third is the belief that there is nothing fundamentally wrong with the Democratic Party. There is no realignment going on. And the proof is that the Democrats still control the majority of offices below the presidency. So myth number 1, the myth of liberal fundamentalism. Number 2, the myth of mobilization. And number 3, the myth of congressional bastion. This comes from William Galston in the Politics of Evasion.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So just to get this straight again, you said number 1, that just seems to be the hardest to understand. So Democrats have failed, this is a myth, because they have strayed from the true and pure faith of their ancestors. Well, so what was the true and pure faith of their ancestors?
If my understanding is correct, based on what she laid out in the context, you go back to FDR being the last president he was 4 terms, right?
Yes.
What was he responsible for? And this is what I think she meant by it. And if anybody has better,
The New Deal.
the New Deal.
The New Deal. They thought he was a socialist.
And so that's the true and pure faith of their ancestors, and they thought that they have strayed from that, if I understood correctly.
Straight from social, straight from social democracy? That's
what I think it's saying.
Okay.
And I think that's what we went through the other night when we went through this, that this liberalism, this liberal fundamentalism, that they have strayed away from it. And if I
go ahead. To Phil's question, so he made it clear by saying strayed away from social. I'm glad you asked that question, Phil. Strayed away from social democracy. So FDR was considered a socialist, which was the veering, is this what you're saying, Elaine? Was the veering away from the pure faith and not to have all these liberal social programs?
And this is where it gets difficult to it's hard to say it. to say it out, but it's a myth. Remember, it's a myth that they have strayed from that social democracy. So what are they saying? Have they strayed from social democracy or have they not?
No, they have not.
So they have not.
So they have not. And so he's looking at the reasons why they don't win. And the myth is that they've strayed away when actually they haven't strayed away. So we went through this the other night. So what's necessary then if they want to win elections?
Compromise.
Compromise.
Because
So if they compromise, I'll see if I can get this now. I mean, it's easy just to state it like that, but to really understand what that means in this context. So to compromise would mean they would actually then be straying from the true pure faith of their ancestors. If I'm meaning the social democracy wasn't a stray, that was a myth. But they were trying to veer away from it. But since Clinton took this to heart, he went back to continuing with, am I right? He went back to continuing with social programs.
No.
But if they're, okay, so straighten me out.
Okay. The next couple of slides will help with that because that helped me a lot too. Because this is, I'm a simple and uneducated high school education and didn't pay a lot of attention, but so I may say this wrong, but to me, it's like trying to grapple with a double negative. Is that the way you would?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, you're absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Okay. So it's kind of like trying to grapple with a double negative. So they're saying that the myth is that they failed because they've strayed away from their true and pure faith of their ancestors. And you put back in there, because she just mentioned the context of being taking you back to FDR and why they had a 4-term president and now they can't win 2 terms and they don't win a lot. And why don't they? Well, because they've strayed away from their true principles of the New Deal, social democracy. They've strayed away from it. Okay, so if it's a myth, then that means they haven't. That means that they're still being liberal social democracy. Right. So
despite them being still true and pure faith of social democracy, they're still not getting the votes.
Right. So they have to do something in order to get the votes.
Which is to compromise.
Which means steer right. If they're to compromise, they would have to steer right. Correct?
Steer moderate. Yeah. Okay, did we all get that then? Because it's tricky to me. We went through this the other night and it was like, I had to really stop and think about that. I don't process double negatives like that very well.
I have a question to this, just as an example. So Bernie Sanders is a true Democrat. And where he's to the way left, considering where the Liberal Party is with Biden's a moderate. So Bernie Sanders and his party, or the people that follow him, are they they're practicing it still?
That's what I would understand it to be.
Right. So Bernie Sanders, AOC,
Yeah,
they would be considered with like FDR, progressive.
yes,
And that's why they don't get the vote.
So the news,
exactly.
Because
And there's a separation between them and the moderates. I mean,
right. So
they try to work together, but they're disagreeing.
Right. So to be a far left, to be progressive like FDR was, you don't get the votes. So in order to get the votes, you have to go towards the middle. This is, like you said, towards the right.
Exactly.
And compromise, where Bernie and AOC don't want to compromise.
Exactly.
And so then you wind up with your own party.
So I remember that big $2 trillion Build Back America Better, I think it was. I mean, he had two big bills out there. And I remember AOC was not going to support was not going to support Biden because Biden agreed with AOC to do these progressive movements. But when it came right down to it, in order to get the votes, he had to abandon the progressive movement and go, like you said, go to the right. And AOC was not supporting Biden on that because Biden compromised.
Absolutely. That's how I saw it.
Okay.
And so,
Go ahead.
and so the new Supreme Court choices that Biden's making are very, you could see how some liberals would really stumble over that because he's wanting to go with a woman, and specifically a woman of color. I think Childs, I think that's her name, is the one that is getting rave reviews from certain very extreme Republicans. I can't think right now their names. Lindsey Graham, and anyway, but so they are, by him doing that, if he chooses one of those that they approve of, those are moderate choices he's making, even though they look appearance-wise liberal, but they're under their belief system is moderate, so therefore he can't transform the Supreme Court, right? Because now would be the chance for him to put in somebody really far left to offset the choices, the ones that Trump put in. So there'll be absolutely still no hope with any of the ones he would replace with, right?
Think about the test being equality, right? Nethinims have to pass the test of equality. And here you are witnessing what the imbalance of the Supreme Court is doing. Put yourself back in the days of slavery and the abolitionists, okay? So you're seeing what the Supreme Court is doing, the conservative, how political the Supreme Court is, and it's not supposed to be political. And so here you are going to be nominating and putting in place a Supreme Court justice, looking at where the conservative balance is taking this country. What does it say to your equality test? To not, regardless of whether or not anything can ever, you're never going to have the what do you call it, the majority. You're not going to have the majority for a very long time, if time were permit. But what happens to your test of equality when you put somebody in there that's a moderate?
Well, I'm thinking it's a tricky test visually because it will be a woman. So that would look like they're trying to balance the court from being all male, white dominated and put in a woman, and then up the ante by putting in an African-American woman. Yet that's why I'm saying it's a tricky test. So equality wise, if you're just looking for a balance of adding another woman and a woman of color to offset all those white men, then that would be your test of equality. But we've learned it runs even deeper in the fabric of all this. So the fact that a moderate, that still would be, do you understand why I'm grappling with it?
Yeah, because go ahead.
Yeah, this is how I see it. This is still a counterfeit. That's what it's a counterfeit because, like you said, like you said, it's a woman, it's Black, and it seems like Biden's doing this wonderful thing for progressive, but it's not the, it's not the colors per se, it's not the gender per se, but it's what she believes in, which is moderate. So it's still a counterfeit. So it looks like Biden's doing well, but it's still a compromise.
Counterfeit equality.
Yes, counterfeit equality.
Yeah, it's not an AOC.
Exactly.
But will people who see that that's good on the surface pass the equality test if they don't know what we know? Sort of when it was so simple between right, Obama and Hillary. On the surface, if you were to see your choice was a African-American man or a woman.
Right. Since it took us this long to figure it out, probably they're not seeing it either. And that's why we have to have the straight message to when we go there to tell them straight that this is, what equality is all about. Then they'll see it.
So true. Even Obama was a moderate.
Yes.
He
So
wasn't a
Elaine, your
Bernie Sanders
question,
type. Although
yes,
he was black,
Jackie.
and it showed that, yes, he could win the black vote too. And also the moderates who were white.
But Elaine, your question was for the Nethinims, this is their test of equality. It's not our test of equality, is it? It's their test, right? I'm not saying we're not all being tested, but
yeah, I think I was just giving that as that is what they're witnessing. And yes, they are tested on equality, as we are tested on equality, gender equality. They're tested. And so they're witnessing this, and they have the opportunity to see what everything you guys have been explaining, that she is a woman of color, but she's a moderate. And the Supreme Court is in I was going to say in trouble. It's in a bad place. It's in a very bad way. And it might be easy to say, well, you know what? It's always going to be a 6-3, for a long time anyways. Let's just go ahead and put ourselves a woman in there and make her a woman of color. But she's not going to really hold to those far left, and maybe they can get something done. Maybe we can get something done together with her influence. She's got an influence of a moderate, and they're about to overturn Roe v. Wade. She's not going to go in there and fight like the video that Phil showed last night. She's not going to go in there and fight like that. At least that's not what it looks like is going to happen. So,
yeah.
So the external, that's what they're being tested on is equality. And I think Phil nailed it. I was going to say that backward. Phil nailed it. When he said that it's counterfeit equality, compromise.
Yeah, that was perfect. I agree.
And
That
it's
made
an
so much
illusion.
sense. Thank you, everybody.
It's a total illusion.
So back to the 2013 article, back quoting now, we, the authors, were under no illusions that those changes would come without a fight. The changes that they're suggesting. There is indeed a fight, but the changes happened. And so there was a fight, but the changes did happen. So she's going to skip down in the article some. Holding on to the control of Congress permitted some Democrats to think things weren't that bad. So holding on to control of Congress permitted some Democrats to think things weren't that bad. And then Elder Tess comments, they lost that majority in a couple of years time, by the way. So back to the quote. So in the summer of 1989, we sat down to write the Politics of Evasion, which the newly formed Progressive Policy Institute published that September. The essay was a frontal assault on three myths that Democrats have been using to explain away a series of dismal defeats. So the three myths that the Democrats have used to explain away their dismal defeats. Our depiction of the party's political standing was blunt. Without a charismatic president to blame for their ills, Democrats must now come face to face with reality. Too many Americans have come to see the party as inattentive to their economic interests, and she already quoted this earlier, indifferent, if not hostile to their moral sentiments, and ineffective in national security, as is most of the case when you set out to dispel cherished illusions. Most of our fellow Democrats were not happy. For some years after, we were not very popular, so they didn't like hearing it. There were, however, some important exceptions, notably a young governor from Arkansas with presidential ambitions, Bill Clinton, and his allies took the findings of the Politics of Evasion to heart, and Clinton became the first Democratic president to win 2 terms in a row since Franklin D. Roosevelt. Okay, so the Politics of Evasion did not make the authors popular, except in a small circle that took it to heart. What did Bill Clinton do to win a second term?
Compromised.
Compromise.
Yeah, specifically though, what did he do? We know we compromised.
He signed into law. DOMA.
Okay, and what else?
Oh, he did this tough on crime legislation and imprisoned lots of black men.
That's not the one.
He signed the
Something to do
Marriage
with
Act.
immigrants.
Christine, say that again.
I forget the words, but it's the Marriage Act, like protection of
Oh,
marriage.
yeah, that's DOMA. That's what Fell said.
Oh, that's DOMA. Okay, sorry.
And somebody else said something. What was it?
Something to do with immigrants.
Immigration. Okay, so it actually was a really long list of what he did, but 2 things that he did that are on that list, he did in 1996. What was 1996 for us that we understand internally?
Formalization of the message.
Formalization of the message. So in 1996, there were 2 things he did, and that was he signed the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, and also attack immigration. So why is he doing these things? He has friends that are homosexual, and he didn't like the act of DOMA, didn't like that. And was this document correct? Was the Politics of Evasion correct? They gave counsel to the Democratic Party. They resisted it, except for one person, Bill Clinton, takes it to heart, and he makes the compromises. He signs DOMA, even though he's a liberal, he's a progressive, or whatever you call him. He has friends that are homosexual. He doesn't like DOMA, but he signs it anyways. So was the document correct?
Well, he got a
What
second term.
document?
The Politics of Evasion.
Yes.
Yeah, he got a second term
Got a second?
because he compromised.
So I want to argue that they were spot on. Their analysis is accurate. The fact that Clinton followed this document to win 2 terms is evidence that it works. And quoting, we argue that there were simply not enough liberals in the electorate to carry the party to victory to win it. Would need to both hold on to liberals and attract a substantial majority of the moderate vote. 3 years later, Bill Clinton sought to do that. Running for president as a New Democrat, he famously promised to end welfare as we know it. And this is a liberal policy, a social democracy, as you put it, right?
Yes.
Welfare. So here you have a Democrat that promises to end welfare as we know it. He campaigned against outsized budget deficits. And what are the Democrats all accused of? All the spending, right?
Increasing the budget deficits.
And trade protectionism, and proposed to reinvent government, not expand it. And that's what Democrats are always accused of, expanding government. Republicans want,
Sounds
That's a
Republican.
conservative belief. too.
right? So the myth of liberal fundamentalism, the myth of mobilization, the myth of congressional bastion. I want to work backwards and just make some comments on the 3 myths. Some comment on the 3 myths. She's going to work backwards and go to the last one first. Could they make could they make a great difference if they just tried to hold the lower offices? If they just tried to hold the lower offices, it's proved that they could not. They were not getting the presidency. They were not making a big difference in these lower offices. They needed to have the presidency. So that gets debunked, right? Could they win if they just mobilized enough minority groups? A bit more now than then. For then, absolutely not, if they mobilized enough minority groups. The demographics have changed over the last 30 years. So just mobilizing enough minority groups, no. But it's their first myth that should take most of our attention. Reading from 1989, the 1989 document, quote, "It is clear that the Democratic Party is actually a moderate liberal coalition party and not a liberal party." So this is what's in the document. It is clear that the Democratic Party is actually a moderate liberal coalition party and not a liberal party. A positioning likely to yield positive results in the years to come. Worst of all, while insisting that they represent the popular will, contemporary liberals have lost touch with the American people. During its heyday, the liberal governing coalition brought together white working class voters and minorities with a smattering of professionals and reformers. Over the past 20 years, however, liberal fundamentalism has meant a coalition increasingly dominated by minority groups and white elites. Does somebody want to explain that? Help me with that term? With that paragraph?
I think it means
What would be
that-
the heyday?
I was going to ask that too, because I'm thinking it goes back to the heyday being.
Sorry, Christine.
Right?
I was thinking it goes back to the New Deal and Roosevelt, I think. Anybody thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's where my thoughts went.
The liberal governing coalition brought together white working class voters and minorities. But over the past 20 years, and this is back in 1989, he writes this. So you're looking back in the 60s, then I guess, right? Is what he's talking about. Liberal fundamentalism has meant a coalition.
That's long after FDR.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these progressive movements stemmed from FDR and continued on.
Yeah.
To
And
me,
we're-
it seems,
go ahead. You go
to me,
ahead.
it seems like there's a huge change in what those people wanted. Those that were white working class people have changed what they wanted. So when was it that the Russians started infiltrating and like coming in and changing our ideas? What year was that happened in the background? Like that one guy was talking about from the KGB. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't remember his name, but he was talking about what they've been doing for years and years, trying to change the way we think so that they could come in and what's the word?
Espionage.
Yeah, but there's what Pyrrhus and Ptolemy did to each other. What's the word? Antigonus.
Subterfuge.
Subterfuge.
Sanctions.
Yes, subterfuge.
And sanctions. Okay.
When did that start? Because it seems to me that the mindset of that working class changed, and they started.
I thought that was marked 1991. She has 1991, 1989 to 91. No, I can't remember. Those 2 years. That's it. From 1989 to 1991. Those 2 years, I can't remember what presentation I was watching, but she has it marked sanctions and subterfuge by bringing the lines. She was using the different lines and relating 1991, 1989 to 1991 as what we could watch for now, even for the Sunday law, on how things are going to decline. And she listed there sanctions and subterfuge. And so I'm sorry. I went up into my mind's eye to try and remember what I just said, and I'm trying to relate it to what you asked, Christine, or you stated, but it still doesn't work out. I still can't figure it out. Sorry. I'm thinking
I
though.
was throwing it out there because doesn't it seem to you also that the mindset changed along the way? That they did want socialism, you know, I mean, everybody was doing really well under the New Deal, but then afterwards, they didn't want it anymore.
You had you had the religious movement that we talked about last night come in and start pushing capitalism, right? The businesses and the pastors all, and then pushing capitalism and all of that. So you've got that battle going on, and you know, I was just thinking with all what you guys are saying about what we studied last night and looking at how you had the two streams. You know, you have the old side, and the new side gets whatever information, new information, and I think another point in what we studied last night is there became renewed interest in the books of Daniel and Revelation, right? So their eyes begin to be opened, but what we see here is they had the programs all in place, the social democracy all in place, and then what you guys are talking about is what then changed their minds to where they couldn't win elections. I mean, I don't understand enough because I'm, like I said, not that educated. But if they would there be people that would say, okay, you got us out of the war, you did this, you did that, and those were all well and good, but do we have to do that all the time? Is that a fair question?
I have a thought on this.
Okay.
Says, let's read that again. Over the past 20 years, however, liberal fundamentalism has meant a coalition increasingly dominated by minority groups. And I'm thinking of the white elites, and the white elites, I mean, who is going to pay for the election of a president on the liberal side? It's the corporations that back them. So I don't know, I could be very wrong on this, but I see it as they're being bought off by the elites. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do anything. And the elites have the money that support them. And so, you know, it sounds like, yeah, we've got this going on the Republican side too, because it's fascism, because they represent the corporations. But so does the new liberals, the new liberals, I say new Democrats. Because do they really believe they're going to get votes if they don't have a person in there that needs to get elected? And Biden was supported by a lot of corporations, so they scratch each other's backs. And that's to me, that's what would keep them as a middle ground Democrat, a moderate. It keeps them in that position because they can't go against what their donors have paid in funds and money, thousands of dollars to put them in there. Does that make sense?
I kind of still struggle with it as well, because it's at 1989 where they make the change, or after 1989.
Yes.
You get to Bill Clinton where they.
Yes.
So
yeah, that's when it came in.
I wish Donna and Renee were here because go ahead. Don't worry, I'm not going to go off stray. But 1989 Reagan, and it was shortly after that that they opened up the mental hospitals and let all, because they didn't want all these social programs. They were costing too much to pay for those people in those hospitals, right? Which has increased our homeless problem now. But alms and doing good was always supposed to be a church thing. I remember that being an argument for a long time, that the government was spending too much money on all these welfare programs, and that had its place in the church. Like if people need food, they can go to the church, to the community service, or other private, what do you call it, when nonprofit organizations to get their help, because the greed, they didn't want the money going to those programs. Anyhow, so I know that's part of the struggle. Anyway, I went flat, but I thought I was going to carry it further, but I couldn't carry it any further.
Good point.
So we're going to run out of time here. We are running out of time. So what they were saying is the party is trying to be too liberal fundamentalists. And because of that, they haven't attended to the needs of the middle class white working demographic. So this is Ellen White. This is Elder Tess saying. So what they are saying is the party is trying to be too liberal fundamentalists. And because of that, they haven't attended to the needs of the middle class. So would that mean they've been too much socially democratic, as you're talking, too much social democracy, and you're not helping your middle class people, correct?
That's why I see it.
Okay. So I think we have quite a ways to go. I don't remember.
Yeah, we're on page 34 of 63.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask you if you looked at, because I can't see it from here.
Okay.
And so I'm going to propose that we either finish this one after lunch and move Phil, or you move me later to finish it. It's good to stay on the thought, so I'll leave it to everybody to decide.
Yeah, I would, I mean, I'm ready, but I would say let's stay with the thought so we don't lose this, because this is important.
Okay.
Agreed.
Everybody else? Okay. Because this
Stay
was a
with the
tough one.
thought.
Okay.
How many more slides do you have?
Well, what she just said, we're about halfway through.
Yeah, we're halfway through.
Oh.
There's 63 slides and we're on number 34.
I'd say come back and finish it afterwards. Sorry, Phil.
Yeah, because I want Phil's presentations too. So and maybe we'll get through the second half a little faster, and then you can still start on yours as well, because I think you have two that you're doing, right?
Yes, I have two.
Okay, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so let's close in prayer. Linda, would you like to close us in prayer?
Okay. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for all the information you've given us and the hope you've given us to understand what we're hearing and reading. And we thank you for the extra time we've needed to make sure we understand these things well enough to teach it to others. And we ask you to help each and every one of us individually to know for ourselves what we lack so far and still, and inspire us to understand all of these things better. Help us to find the time in our schedules help us not to lose focus, us to prioritize these lessons day to day. And put a desire in each and every one of our hearts. Do your will in regard to Third Angel's message, so that we're as effective as possible in bringing other people to this message, helping them to understand it and accept it to the point where they will want to join us. And we pray for all those in the movement who are struggling with the message in all its aspects, whether it be sexism or racism, or homophobia, or nationalism. Pray that they make better use of their time to make sure for themselves whether they're on the right path or not. We pray for your hand to be upon them and your power to be given to them to turn around from the direction they're going before it's too late. And we thank you, Lord, for Sabbath and for the meetings going on around the world and for the elders. And we thank you for hearing and answering this prayer. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.